one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Wayne Dyer is he said, when you trust in yourself, you're trusting in the same wisdom that created you. If you believe that life happens for you and not to you, then you can kind of see the synchronicities. Like when I look back in my life and all the things that I went through and experienced, the successes and, of course, all the failures, if I hadn't have gone through those things, if I didn't have a pain that I needed to solve in my life, I would have never had any reason to seek out and learn these things. And so it's like when I look back on it now, over the course of my life, it's magical to me how everything just kind of lined up at the same time. It's like people just kind of drop right into your life when you're least expecting, like how you and I met. Just hanging out in the jacuzzi. I was, hey, what's up? And here we are doing a podcast 24 hours later.
Yeah. Just trusting that, yeah, when you have these challenges, like it just gives you a different perspective in how you attack these, like whatever problems you're facing, right? You think that like, oh, this is a good challenge. Like this is an opportunity for growth right here. And you can't avoid it. It's just the more you achieve, like they say, what, new levels, new devils. So the higher you get up on the mountain and the more you climb for, like the things are going to get harder. And like you said earlier, your threshold for stress and your threshold for, things that happen just increases and you're able to take on more. And that's what makes you stronger.
Like our fear of something is always way worse and more intense than actually experiencing what you fear in life.
Yeah, and it's like by having that fear, also like let's say the bad thing happens and you had that fear already, like you're experiencing trauma twice. Like you already created it in your mind, and then when it happens, now it actually happens, or even though it likely doesn't happen, like it's just you relived it twice. Like why do you do that to yourself, right? I mean, always have a plan to know what you're going to do in case something the worst happens, but like focus on the
plan
good.
for the worst, but hope for the best. In other words, when I was in my early 20s, I met this investor. He was investing in properties down at South Beach when South Beach was undergoing that the Renaissance, if you will, where you had a lot of old retired people that would just sit out there and count the blades of grass, basically wait to die, and then they all kind of died off, and you had all these old buildings that were built in the 20s and 30s, and they were dilapidated and run down, and they started boarding them up, and they were everywhere. And then so these investors came in and started buying them up, fixing them up, turning them into condos, selling them, condo buildings. Sometimes they knocked them down. And one of the things he told me, he says, anything you do, always know your downside risk. What happens if all of your assumptions are wrong or a lot of them are wrong and shit goes sideways? What are you going to do? What's your, it's like say you buy a rental property and you put a tenant in there and they seem nice. And you're like, all the money I'm going to make, they're going to basically pay for my mortgage. But what happens if the tenant you put in there, maybe they lose their job? Or maybe you miss something on their background check and they're a scam artist and they know how to stay in the property and work the legal system and stay in there 6 months to a year and fight it until you're able to actually kick them out. And then on top of that, when they move out, they wreck your place. But an average person, they don't know their downside risk and they get into something and they have a miserable experience.
Yeah.
Not because they couldn't do it, but because they had a crappy strategy. And now because they had that crappy strategy and they had a bad experience, which equals pain, now they're more adverse to taking on risk in the future to make money and starting a business or whatever it happens to be. And when you have failures like that in life, it's like your ability to stretch beyond your comfort zone and take risks and go for things you want, it actually contracts because you got burned once and then you worry about getting burned again. And when you focus on avoiding getting burned, you're basically acknowledging and putting that energy out there that you expect to get burned. And then so you go and you do the same thing. You literally attract somebody else in your life who burns you, which further causes you to contract your boundaries, to contract the little box that you're willing to operate, and you don't want to step outside of that. versus just realizing, hey, I screwed up. I had a bad strategy. I need to fix this. I need to learn how to do better next time around. But a lot of people, they give up.
Yeah.
That, they may have tried one business and it didn't work out, and they're like, oh, I guess I'm not meant to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just about like what strategy is one thing, and also having the optics of knowing where you're headed. It's sort of like, you know that your strategies get from point A to point B on Google Maps, but if you can't see where you're going, you can't, navigate yourself to success, to get yourself there. You can't say, I'm going to eventually get there, and there's a strategy, but if you can't see where it's headed, like...
I had a strategic planner years ago when I was in real estate that my partners and I were working with, and he was a very successful CEO. He'd grown one company from and this was over the course of 5 years, it was like $5 million in sales to $60 million in sales in 5 years. And he said, there's no such thing as a bad idea, only bad plans. And that's what happens to a lot of people. They don't have a good strategy. They try to execute a flawed strategy, and then it doesn't work out. And then they adopt the belief that there's something wrong with them and they're not capable of it.
Well, yeah, and the idea and strategy is one thing. That's a more important thing that is a person who's executing the strategy, like business owners, right?
Their mindset.
Yeah. Tony says the biggest chokehold on any growth of business is the leader. It's the psychology of the leader. And yeah, the mind has to be right. Managing your heart and your head is super important to just execute and knowing that you can execute.
Yeah, I remember when I was in real estate, we had it was funny. I had completely forgotten about this, and I was having this conversation with my dad years ago, and I remember a time. This was like I think 1999, and so we were flipping foreclosure properties, and then I got into doing general real estate and mortgages, and so. If you've ever seen like those bandit signs, little fold-over signs, like when you come off the interstate, there's like these U-shaped wire, and then they got a fold-over sign that you fold over it and you staple the edges, and then it keeps the wind from blowing it off, and they're really inexpensive to produce. And so we had these signs like all over the place. We put them in Orange County, Osceola County, Seminole County, Lake County. I had these two guys who were working part-time in the middle of the night when there's no traffic, putting them everywhere. And the phones were like ringing like crazy. And so we were getting tons of leads, and they were turning into sales, and it was a profitable way to advertise. And I remember one day I saw a woman pull up, and it had like I think it was Orange County Code Enforcement, which was city of Orlando basically. And I could see the back of her truck was just full of probably 100 of these signs of ours. They call them bandit signs basically. And I walked out. I was like, "Hey, can I help you?" And she, asked if I was the owner or these are my signs. I was, "Yeah." And she says, "The last couple hours, I've been picking these things up all over town, and these signs are illegal. It's against code. You can't be putting them out there, or you can put them out on the weekends, like on a Friday if you're selling house. But then by Sunday afternoon, you have to pull them all down." I was like, "Well, that's kind of not feasible to do that." And I was like, "All right, well, I guess we won't put them in Orange County." And then it was like one by one, every single city did the same thing. And I remember her telling me, just like, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to get all these signs pulled out. And if you don't do it, we're going to bring your company up in front of the Code Enforcement Board and fine you. And I was like, there's not much you can do. And I remember, a week or two after that, we had a company party and had like a concert in my backyard. My business partner played with his band, and I think we had a couple hundred people there. And it was this really great party, and I remember I had told my dad what had happened with all this, and my dad was talking to Andy, who we've done some podcasts with, he was my top salesperson for the whole time we worked together. And I remember my dad's like, "Well, what are you guys going to do?" And Andy was just like, "I'm not worried about it. Corey will always figure something out." He says, "We'll find a way." And I did. That's the way I looked at it. I just looked at it as, okay, well, we can't advertise that way. What way can we advertise? And then that eventually led, after that, to us to start doing infomercials and advertising on TV. And that whole process, it took like 6 months just to have our first closing. I remember we were spending like $10,000 a month, every month. And it wasn't until month 6 that we had our first closing. I think it was like a loan. And we took in like $4,500 in commission. And then I had to obviously pay half of that to my sales agent. And so by that point, we're like 60 grand in the hole. And I took in $2,000.
Yeah.
Most people look like and go, oh my God, what'd you do? But I looked at it as that, yeah, I had invested that money, but now we were at the point where the phone was ringing, the leads were coming in. And if you keep spending that 10 grand, what would happen as the months went by, you got more, you had one closing, then the next month it might have been 2 closings, the month after that it might have been 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point where we were bringing enough money in profit after you paid the commissions and paid the assistants, the loan processors and stuff. And then, then we exceeded beyond that. We actually started making a profit off that. And then once we had more leads, and then so we started hiring more sales agents. We hired more sales agents. We had more deals. Then we need more processing staff. Then we need more computers. And then you just continue to grow to handle the capacity. But all that stuff came from mindset and looking at it as that it's an obstacle to overcome. We just got to find a different way to market that. And like life is constantly throwing things at you that way that you got to change your approach. If what you're doing is not working, you got to change. It's easy to give up and quit and go, okay, well, I'll just go do something else, or I'll go work for somebody else, and I'll play it safe. I'll do it Monday through Friday, and I won't bump into the walls of life too much. Try not to piss anybody off. I'll pay my bills. I'll live a nice, average life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you're a high achiever and you got big goals and big dreams, you got to learn to manage your mindset. Otherwise, you crash and burn. That's it. You never take any other risks the rest of your life.
Yeah. Once you get to a certain level, there's a certain level you can't get back to. So having that mental resiliency is super important.